Welcome to the Strong Legacy Podcast, a platform highlighting leadership, service, and looking after one another on the front line and beyond. Today's guest is Senior Sergeant Duane Amos, a respected police leader whose career has been shaped by service, mentorship, and genuine care for people. This conversation explores his policing journey, the responsibility of mentoring others, and what it truly means to look after your mate's six. It is a timely reminder that strong policing cultures are built on trust, camaraderie, and shared accountability. G'day, mate. How you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. Yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll dive straight into the questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, too easy, mate. I thought I'd better turn up with another injury, but not work-related, mate, just to keep going with that recurring theme.
Yeah, got the wing going. All right. We'll fire away. First question, mate. Can you please share your policing journey so far?
I really hadn't thought about policing as a young fella, so it was actually a second thought. Military was my first, and I wanted to either do flying or medicine. I was a straight math science kid, brought up in a good family, and pretty much it was around education was the key, and get the right education, and the world was your oyster. So good sense of moral compass from a good family and that sort of stuff. But I had already sort of finalised a lot of my work at 16, duxing school, and then doing the straight math science for year 11, 12. And I was recruited in Townsville and went through all my processes and that sort of stuff. And, turned out during my medical examinations that apparently I was colourblind. So essentially, I was knocked out of everything to do with what I actually wanted to do from a lifestyle perspective and a career. And I was sort of very disheartened at that point in time, and walked across the road from the Townsville recruiting office with the military and walked into the police station just as an afterthought, and thought, oh, well, there's another career opportunity that I hadn't really thought of. And interestingly enough, I run into the good old sergeant in those days there in the late 80s, probably what isn't the fittest man, and probably seen plenty of bars in his time. And I still remember the term when he sort of said, oh, what are you all dolled up there for, princess? And that was because I had a, tie and suit on that I'd borrowed. And told him that I'd been across and done my military testing. He said, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, apparently I'm colourblind. And he said, well, we don't have you quiz either. And I walked out. I then became a street kid as a result of that, and lived on the streets of Townsville. Pretty much got angry with the world and pushed back against my family and pushed back away from that moral compass. But and I look back on that now, and as much as you're bitter and twisted at the time, it's certainly taught me some lessons in terms of the way you treat people. What you can say at a point in time that can change a person's life for their future. And you can either, put someone down or you can pick someone up. And, I took that put down personally because I'd been around, good people that were always, either teaching me to fight or teaching me how to behave and what you need to do in society to succeed. And when that's taken away from you, at a young age, it really throws you out of whack at that 16, 17 mark. So I was very lucky at that point in time that I was the guy that I was actually working with, and my fight instructor was an ex-Vietnam veteran and an ex-regiment guy that pretty much took in all the stray cats. And his daughter is now in the job here, and I've got a long-term affiliation with them and their family. And it's interesting because they're the people that give you that second chance and can see that there's still something in your soul at that point in time. So long story short, he basically made some phone calls and got me basically into the military. I ended up into signals, and it wasn't until I was actually down. I was based at outside of Sale at that stage, down in Victoria, cold mongrel joint. So for that good old Queensland country kid that's born down in Mount Isa, Calcadoon country, genes of when you're riding horses, that they weren't for anything to do with cold. So I had no jumpers, no jeans, that sort of thing. So interestingly enough, I'd been at a fight at Melbourne Town Hall and I copped a really good leg kick at that point in time. So in those days, it was king of the ring and just rub the heat into it and then get you back in for your elimination bouts, and then you're finished at the end of the night where you were. So I went back to base and carried that injury for an extended period of time. And when the medics saw me, we ended up having an argument about I shouldn't be able to see traffic lights with my level of colour blindness. Long story short, that was all tested again, and I actually passed. And I'd actually been wrongly tested. It was a clerk that tested a lot of these A-grade students at Townsville at that point in time. So a number of the boys had committed suicide, and I'd gone down that path as a street kid and damaged my family relationships and a lot of friendships at that point in time through my schooling. So my girlfriend at the time was involved in trying to get recruited into policing, and I found myself while I was going through a redress of grievance with the commanding officer of Base Squadron that I'll have a go at the police academy. And I then joined the Victorian Police Force. I was out within 3 days with the military and into policing, and was in the Vic Coppers until 95 down there. Loved it. Had an absolute ball. They were the days of the old long coats and the long battens and that sort of stuff. A lot of stories, a lot of memories, and good mates down there. And that's where I met the princess. And everyone joked and laughed and pretty much sort of said, you'll never get her out of Victoria. And I said, well, if Carlton win the grand final this year in 95, I've got a good chance of it leaving the state. So that happened, and I became a retread and came up in 95, graduated February 96, and hit a few hurdles in the academy there, again, with processes and procedures which hadn't sort of been, let's say, verified with that new and emerging program for leaders coming from other jurisdictions. And I, took the opportunity to come back home and come up to Far North Queensland. So I was able to get in as far, and that allowed my wife to stay with education in special needs with kids. So been up here ever since then, predominantly northern region, far northern region. Never really had any concerns about progressing through the ranks. It was all about taking on responsibilities and changing things that I thought were wrong, or giving opportunities to other people and trying to right the wrongs. So I spent 13 years as a industrial representative with the union back in the old days there with Wilco and Steve Mahoney, and a lot of the old crew, which probably set us up from a union perspective where we are financially nowadays with our sick leave and sick leave bank. And had the opportunity to take position as the OIC at Normanton. That should have been 2-year posting at that stage, the first senior sergeant out there. And I ended up 7 years out there, but part of that was my fault. Obviously, I became a councillor out there on the Indigenous vote, and absolutely loved it. But unfortunately, that was 7 years away from my family, young family. And then back into DDOing in 2017. And then spent two and a half years as the government coordinator before I had my accident, and then came back to policing and back here in DDO world.
Nice. It's a very big scope of the career you've had. Like working 2 different states, and plus also working for the army and then council, and very vast experience. So no, it's a very very interesting pathways. But did you want to share some more stuff about your time as when you had that somebody knocked you back, and then you ended up your relationship and everything in Townsville, and getting on the street? Like, how was that like?
As a kid, you don't realise how immature you are, and I say the difference. When I invest a hell of a lot with kids, when I've been coaching over all the years, or majority of my career has been through those Indigenous communities around investing in kids. They are the future, and a lot of times they're a product of their environment. So I was very mindful of my behaviour in uniform, and what I say and what I do. Particularly around young people, because you're impressionable, and I saw that with myself. And I used to say to the young fellas, when they were talking about, I do this or I do that or I do these crimes as a result of, and I just sort of said, well, probably the difference between myself and them and why I probably didn't end up in the criminal justice system was that, as I said to him, I had a good moral compass and an upbringing, so the difference between right and wrong. So I was quite happy to take food off your plate when you'd finished eating. So you learn around behaviour management with people. It's interesting, when you're living off the streets and you're hungry. I was too proud to eat out of a rubbish bin, but I can guarantee you that you leaving steak and chips there at the burger restaurant on the Strand in Townsville, and you walk away when you haven't finished it because you're too busy impressing your girlfriend, then it was going to be mine. So again, it's stealing for survival compared to what we see with kids today that are stealing as part of fun and they're a product of their environment. So difficult at that point in time because it takes you years and years to rebuild that from your family perspective. But I say, lessons learned at that point in time, you can go down the wrong path. And I say that's the difference is that kids who don't have that moral compass at the start and those behavioural boundaries and a good grounding is why they end up part of the system, and where I was probably lucky to take that alternative path and go, well, I do have a compass to stand and fall back on. So if I follow that, it didn't help me last time, but I'm the adult per se now, and no one's helping me. So I live and die by my own sword.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing that because it's such an important message there. Looking back with your experience, what was the experience that most shaped you as a leader?
I think most of the leadership, came from, trauma related or high risk situations. Seeing the way you behave yourself, seeing the way others behave around you, seeing the way others behave. And that's not built up on, expectations, based on what you're doing at a point in time, whether you're working in a specialist area or your general duty frontline response. But I look at a lot of the leadership that I was exposed to, the old sergeants that we had pretty much. I remember one of the old blokes saying to me that, look, you're coming out fresh, you're coming out green. You'll know the legislation and you may not know how to move through that system with the administration and get a person to court. But if you go back to your moral compass, you know when someone's doing something wrong. It's just ticking those boxes in terms of process, policies, procedures, and the law. So he basically sort of, you bag and tag, bring them in. And, my job is to actually put that old head on and that leadership around, then walking you through those pathways to become good at what you do. And I think that's what we miss a lot nowadays, as in, we've got a lot of junior people coming through, very lot of workload for them, extreme and unrealistic expectations from a lot of our juniors, which is difficult. So that's why, I've chosen to remain in that DDO forum because, they're the next generation. And when we retire, if we haven't actually developed enough young leaders to support the amount of junior people we do have coming through, we're in a world of hurt. So we either contribute to it or be part of the problem. So, and from my own personal perspective, taking on that officer in charge role at Normanton was a very big leadership jump in terms of a large division, demographically diverse with the Indigenous components there. Liquor licenses in community that didn't have alcohol management plan, so you had that eclectic mix of alcohol moving through your community into other communities that were discrete Indigenous communities that weren't allowed alcohol, and then it was an interesting dynamic. But from my perspective, developing a team around you and getting people that would normally not come to those positions that stay for 4, 5, 6 years with you. And stay for your tenure, and then seeing those people now as senior sergeants in Thursday Island and Cape stations, and watching people like yourself go from constables in Mount Isa and see your journey and that reinvestment back into those communities that I sort of say blooded that generation of people, and why they keep continuing to reinvest in those remote areas where others will avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very interesting point there, and such a inspiration one too, because if you don't invest, then you don't get the product at the end, and exposing people. And I was lucky enough to our paths crossed so many times and provided a lot of guidance to me in very different situations and difficult situations too. So I'm thankful on that. Um, how has the policing changed over the years, and what has remained constant in your opinion?
Oh, I think it's interesting you asked that question because when I ran in the state election a couple of years back, Bob Catter asked me that same question, and I look back at the time there, and I remember replying to him jokingly that the same kit that we wear nowadays is what we were issued to deploy overseas to fight a war, and yet we wear that day to day now. So I see that as a sad indictment, not a positive in terms of one. It's been great from a work health safety perspective, but to see the level of protection and equipment that we need now. Whether it's through a lack of legislative support, indemnities, and those sort of things there. But that level of violence that the team's exposed to on a day-to-day basis is probably where I've noticed the most significant change. And I've stayed frontline, majority of my career. So seeing it from a constable at 20 in Melbourne, which I thought was pretty violent in its time, with the gangs that we had in those days. And a lot of the demographic issues we had in Springvale and Dandenong, and City Patrol Group, and that was interesting. But seeing it now, 36, 37 years later, but on a more consistent basis, it's the number of code 2s that our crews are going to, I have serious concerns about, that mental health and wellbeing. One, in terms of creating apathy, because we're going to code 2s, lights and sirens all the time for jobs that are coded appropriately based on, the requirements. But compared to what we used to as a code 2, which is lights and sirens, we had time for that mind and muscle memory and that preparation to say, I'm going into a tactically dangerous situation. I need my head switched on. I need to be talking to my partner. We need to be talking about safe routes in, etc. Form up points. Whereas, I think it's fantastic the crews, their ability to do that now, because they're doing it more and more on a consistent basis. So we are developing, young leaders very quickly. But I think at a point in time, it's going to be interesting to see that map journey on how long it is before they fall over, and how long it is before that health and wellbeing is really being impacted. Because you look at the amount of use of force that's required now, the level of exposure to violence, the level of exposure to injury and trauma, like 2 or 3 suicides in a shift that DDOs are going to and following up, where we have to go to all these reportable deaths nowadays. You have to wonder whether that are we prepared for that as an organisation, and if we're not as an organisation, what are we doing from a leadership perspective to make sure that we're supporting our troops on the front line that are going to those jobs, and how we're building up their resilience and that emotional resilience for them.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point there. Again, it's one of those questions like it's hard to answer. But yeah, it's a question that needs to be asked, I suppose. Why is mentorship critical in policing, particularly for younger or new officers in your viewpoint?
I think it's the baseline. I mean, academy will give you what we used to say was the chalk and talk,
Yeah,
but mentoring teaches behaviours, and it's probably what I sort of have always sort of concentrated on myself from a leadership perspective, and that's around that the mentoring as well as that leadership by example. I don't expect people to do something that I'm not prepared to do myself, and for those who work around me, there is that expectation, knowing that I'm going to be there with them, and I'm going in first and I'm coming out last. And that's what I try and model on a day-to-day basis, from a mentor perspective. And I see now we've got more first years than we do people being able to actually take them on in the first year constable program and mentoring, and I'm quite happy as a DDO taking those extras out. One, they get to see the volume of work that we're doing. They get to see different styles of leadership, but I'm hoping also that it allows them to see seniority and different opportunities for themselves to develop through mentoring, because we were always taught there may be some things you like about Armit as a leader, and there's maybe some things you don't. But you don't have to take all of your leadership qualities. You take those bits that suit you, or the nuances to your personality, and those, what I call those idiosyncrasies to each person, whether they're in a leadership position or not. There's bits and pieces you like about friends, and what you're prepared to tolerate. So I think mentoring is critical because that exposes people to real life experiences. It gives them opportunities for yourself to reflect on lessons learned and mistakes made and where you've developed personally. But it also allows you to actually personally develop yourself when you can see junior people coming through. And I find it difficult that it's one thing to mentor and to critique rather than criticise, because I look back on it now and go, did I look that young? Did I do those same silly things? And the answer is yes. So when I reflect on those things, or I've got to talk to people about challenging decisions that have been made or mistakes that have been made, it's very much based on my own mistakes and how I wanted to probably been spoken to or shown how to develop or do that better in the future and become better at what I did, rather than the old days where you were browbeaten and probably walked away still wondering what you did wrong.
It's such an important thing. It's like building blocks. Or like Lego. You got to find the right piece to build your whatever you're building. So leadership, I suppose, to shape yourself for future is picking those blocks and build that what you want, what leader you want to be. Because everybody has different skills. And you bringing all different skills into one to make yourself a better person, a better leader moving forward. So now it's a very, very good point there. How do you identify when an officer needs guidance, support, or a quiet conversation?
Well, I suppose we're lucky from a DDO perspective. We're turning up to a lot of those tactically dangerous situations and some of those critical jobs. So whilst we can't be at all those jobs, I say, when I had a Connie in the car the other night, he goes, "Oh, how do you know which jobs to go to?" And I suppose it's that old acronym, the what's important now. What is the biggest risk to the service? What's the biggest risk to my staff at a point in time? And then it's the same thing as breaking that down when you're actually at that scene there. So I find that it doesn't matter, what the job is. I work on the 3-second rule. When I actually approach someone, they're either going to give it up emotionally or they're going to give it up verbally, or that behaviour will actually start to give you an uncomfortable trigger. Basically, that sixth gut instinct.
Yep.
That furrow brow, when you're talking to someone. So we had a challenging one the other day with a well decomposed body and that sort of stuff. And again, it's that black humour which is required, and then having that discussion and then following up afterwards to sort of say, how are you tracking with that? That was a pretty shit job, and talking them through those processes. And then it doesn't matter whether it's an injury notification, as one that may bounce back on them with their PTSD years down the track, or their overexposure to the trauma, or whether it's an environmental trigger when they have those smells again when they go back to a point in time of a traumatic event. It's very much around understanding that, and then understanding your people at a point in time. And that's why I say, those debriefs. We had a nasty job on our night shift with a vehicle disruption strategy, and we had 2 of our vehicles damaged in the post-cordon event, and a couple of officers injured out of it. And it's very much around, we can't do the hot debrief that night, but it's about reaching out to the people that are injured. It's about being available to the team, and then it's that follow-up the next day to see how they're tracking. And a lot of that's an investment when you're not at work. People who think you can do this job just between those hours of 6 to 2 shift or whatever your shift is, it's not one of those jobs where you can do that, because you're heavily invested emotionally, and the further you go in the job, understanding that investment in the people, they're the most expensive asset, but they're also the most important. So each one has to be looked at individually. So Even in the hot debrief, it's around, like who might be struggling at a point in time, plus being open and transparent enough to have someone come up to you and say, I don't think so-and-so's tracking well. Because it's good when you have junior staff that sort of say, I sort of was put back in a job there when the first year came up and sort of said, how you going, boss? Like I've seen the jobs tonight, which is good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
We're developing young leaders, and they can
Yeah.
see the volume of the jobs and they appreciate you turning up to them. So I think that's a healthy environment.
Yeah.
Whereas the old days it wasn't talked about. We did that on the night shift barbecues or after a beer. That was your hot debrief, basically.
Yeah. No, that's a very, very good point there. And yeah, it's so important to have it's both ways. So you gotta, the junior officers also checking up on their bosses too. It's both ways, and having that kind of discussion is, I think, so important. What leadership behaviors do you believe build trust and credibility with teams?
I'd have to say one that I have heavily focused on is integrity. Without integrity, I think you're very much limited in terms of a lot of those other leadership models and examples that you can actually then go through, because I said, once you take my integrity away from me or you question my integrity, that's usually when you're going to upset me. The rest I can cop, the names and all those sort of things there. But, attack my integrity after, this amount of investment into to policing and protecting my team and protecting the communities that we work in. That's when it really starts to get under your skin. So I'd say that's probably the most important from me is that integrity. And then, as I said, that leadership by example. Like once I had my experience and the critical injuries that I had in 2021, you fall back on all of those things there. Like you can wallow in self-pity, or go back to your moral compass and that integrity. Like I'm not going to ask someone to do something that I haven't done myself. So a lot of that peer support over all those years is based on, why do they come to you? Why do they have that conversation? Why are they comfortable enough to talk to you about it? And you'd like to think that that's because, one, there is that integrity and confidentiality when those conversations are being had. There is that ongoing support, which is unconditional.
Yeah.
And as I say, it may not be the most important thing to me, but if you're coming to talk to me about it, it's the most important thing to you, and that's the way it needs to be treated, no matter how minor it is. Because that could be that last small thing on the top of multiple major incidents, which is your critical threshold, and that's your breaking point, which if not managed well or, pushed aside or brushed aside with an ignorance or an arrogance, can be the difference between someone building up that emotional resilience or engaging with the right people to be able to then, build up their barriers to be able to keep going in the job.
Yeah, no, that's a very important point there. What does looking after your mate six means to you in practical terms?
To me, it goes more than just the job that you're turning up to at the time. It's very easy from the tactically dangerous situations because it's in your mind at the time. It's your core focus. Having the six, as far as I'm concerned, has always been about the afterthought. It's about that follow up. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, a mate of mine rang and just sort of said, "Hey, need some time out. Coming up to see you." So the response is, spare beds there, beers are cold, where the keys are. Nothing more needs to be said. He's reaching out at that point in time, and he turned up, and he was still struggling with the Wyanbilla stuff, and needed to unload, needed to vent. So a couple of days around that, that consistent environment and non-judgmental.
Yep.
And he's got his Batman suit on and he's gone back to work again. So I think having your six is very much around that, as in being available for people at a point in time. I find that very difficult at the moment, whether it's domestic violence or it's child safety after hours. If it's so important, why there's only one number for the entire state? If it's so important, then why don't they answer after hours? And I use that as an example because if I don't answer that phone call for a mate, or I don't send a text message saying I can't talk, I'm going to catch up with you shortly, dude. I look at those critical points that are missed at a point in time, and that's what I say is, having someone sick, which is, like as a peer support officer, I pride myself on the fact that I've still got people that are now out of the job. Probably, actually, one of my constables is 20 years out of the job and still struggling, but still going well, and still stays in touch. So it says a lot from that. That they still feel comfortable enough to be able to ring up, touch base, unload, and I call it the factory reset. What do you think about what I'm doing with this? And that was a discussion around the new use of amphetamines and some of the different medicinal vitamins in long-term post-traumatic stress. So that's also development for me because it then forced me to actually start researching that. I hadn't been exposed to it before.
Yeah.
And I noticed today it was actually on the news there where it's actually been, it's now also been approved for veterans. So under the new policy, which is interesting, it shows that they must be getting some wins out of it. So it's something more in the toolbox to say, hey, have you thought about? But I look back and sort of go, well, okay, the good thing is that, when they're doing well, they're calling, and when they're not doing well, they're calling. And you look back at the mates that we lost one of our own up here last, actually it's a couple of years ago now, and I'd only been speaking to him. We'd gone on a run of 12-hour shifts together, and I said to him about he just sounded tired, and I said to him at the time, mate, you need me to organise someone for you tomorrow? He goes, no, I've just got one more to do, with the staffing we had at the time, and unfortunately we never spoke to him again, So you don't reflect on that negatively, it's not your phone call that might make the difference, but you sometimes wonder what that person's going through at a point in time, why they didn't make the phone call or why they didn't reach out. So that's I look at that as that's opportunities for us to develop, as a service as well as individuals and as organisations around, it doesn't have to be named a specific service. It doesn't have to have a name. It's about being available to your people and being able to have that conversation when they actually need it.
Yeah, it's so important to have that non-judgmental, like what you said, If you are not judgmental, people will ring out whether they're in good times or bad times, and that's what you want. I suppose that's exactly when people are struggling. I think that's what they need most times. And how can supervisors? What are the warning signs that an officer may be struggling, in your opinion, or in your experience?
One of the ones that I was recently involved with was the number of complaints. That's a good indicator that either they're not managing well themselves, or they're overexposed in terms of the environment. I look back on my PDS diagnosis and use that as a warning myself, with officers at the time, just because they're going into all of these high risk situations and they're coming out well. Each one of those I keep sort of saying is just chipping away at the armour, and it's like cricket. You can be that cricketer that plays that shot 1,000 times and gets it right in the nets, and it's just that one good ball which you can't do anything about. That you play that same stroke and it goes through to the keeper, and that's it. You walk, and it's the best armour. It's the smallest blade that finds the weakness. So it's very much around those circumstances there. We're drawing on your own personal experiences and go, well, okay. The behaviour of people, some are, quite overt and know when they're in trouble, and others are just trying to fly under the radar.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good example there. And the trigger points, I suppose. How can supervisors create an environment where officers feel safe to speak up? This is where the non-judgment.
Yeah, well, I sort of say that, the only time you should see me is not when there's a working for Queensland survey on. You know what I mean? I'm a senior supervisor. I'm on the road. I should be around my people pretty much all the time. And what I try and do is in those circumstances, like if I've got a heap of tasks for the DTAC project, I'll go and see the shifty downstairs and sort of say, hey, mate, I need to have my head down for a bit here. Just call me if you need me. I'm still watching all the systems and that. So it's
Yeah.
very much around making sure that I have the relatability, that I'm under the same pressures of what they are in terms of, high volume of tasks, competing interests, competing priorities in terms of administration compared to, jobs in queue, etc. And the other thing is that around making sure people understand your vulnerabilities. Um, I I was actually buoyed by the number of people that got in touch with me, when I had my critical incident, and they just asked if, do you need anything? I said, no, mate, got my head in the right space. I'm back in the gym. I'm back training. And they're going, oh, what's the point of going to the gym when you're in a wheelchair? And I'm going, you're missing the point. The point was getting to the gym.
Yeah.
It's not what I did in the gym. Like I was looking for that win for the day, and that win was, transitioning down a staircase with the broken back and the broken neck and the other fractures, and then getting up at that consistent time in the morning to establish a routine again, and then getting out to the car, getting into the car, getting to the gym, and then getting yourself around that environment. I think it was said today by the doctor on the news when I was coming in on ABC this morning around that new funding that was available to veterans. And I know there's people that would probably go, what do they need to have a surfing lesson for, or what do they need to have a gym membership? And it's very much around, he made a valid point there where he said, the problem is that, when people are in crisis or they're sick, they are withdrawn, they're not around those normal activities.
Yeah.
So what is it around getting to those activities? And I say part of my mental health and well-being at that point in time was, I was still working from home, but my home had actually become a prison. It became a 3-meter space where I sat on a computer. I laid on a bed under heavy morphine and medication. I ate, and the toilet was, within a transitional point as well. That's not exactly living. It is at a point in time and necessary, but getting out and making sure that my house was not my prison. I still needed it to be my castle. So very much around that injury management and that rehabilitation for myself was, how do I reset my head every day? And that can be, working on a task list that's downstairs from an injury management perspective, looking at the pool.
Yeah.
It's about being at the gym and getting to the gym in the morning and seeing other people succeed and train.
It's the
The
mindset.
92-year-old, yeah.
Yeah.
The old Fred that used to turn up, like he's in his 90s and he turns up every morning at 5:30 at the gym. He doesn't do much, but I look back and I sort of go, well, but he's still there.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your excuse?
How many people make it their New Year's resolution and pay the
Never
membership
show
and
up.
never get there? So I go, hats off, dude. If I'm doing that at 92, fantastic, because he stuck to a routine. And you look at it now and you look at life differently in those circumstances. And very much there's that sense of belonging. They get to see the people in the morning. They have their social activities. They engage. They talk about fitness, other functions, and it's pretty much they're set up for the day. They walk out. They've already got their achievements done for the day, and away they go. And it's rinse and repeat the next day. So my injury management recovery was very much around that. Get the head in the right space first. Control the environment, which is no different to work. Get your head in the right space when you're turning up to work. Start controlling the environment, as in, what can we control? And that's our behaviour, because every job we go to, we don't control any of it. We're turning up as first response. So if we get all those other things in place first in terms of, are we in the right headspace? Have we left what's home at home? Are we as physically able as we possibly can? Are we trained and upskilled with all the resources we have at that point in time? Because that's when that critical decision making is going to come into play. and you
Yeah.
need to be on your A game.
Yeah, no, that's such an important point there because yeah, I was, I think we spoke offline about I was in the hospital getting a procedure done. I was there for a week. It was all heart procedures, and after come back from the procedure, I was in the recovery ward with all these people in this recovery ward, and they all had they're all there, and they all had this. Some of them had their bloody they had 100% or 99% arteries blocked, or some had a stent put on, and whatever else. But that's hearing the story. They were all like drink 12 stubbies every night, don't go to the gym, they eat McDonald's. And there's some people were getting McDonald's delivered there. And I was just like, I can't be here. Get me out of this recovery. Put me outside or put me underneath the fucking stairs, but I would not stay in this recovery with these people. Not being negative person, but I just could not be there. Mentally, I just could not be there because I was there because of a congenital issue I've had. I was born with it from my heart, and I did everything in my life to be fit and healthy, eat right, all these things, all the time. And here, these people I'm with is all these people that just haven't looked after themselves, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, I can't be here. So it was good that the hospital found me another place to put me because I just couldn't be there. It was like it was eating me away. So no, yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, when you got that kind of injuries, you just want to, even if you're not doing anything, you just want to be there in an environment where it's positive, just to get your head right, get the mindset going. So, that's a very good point there. What role does peer support play alongside formal wellbeing programs? Like, I know you're a peer support officer too, and obviously helped a lot of people, including myself, with a lot of things. So yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think I formally did the course in probably about 2006, but that's the formal side of it. But prior to that, it was probably informal all the time. It's interesting, say, catching up with some of those mates that I was on the street with, as young fellas, and seeing where they are at points in their life now. And it's interesting when you talk about everyone has a different journey, everyone has a different story and those sort of things there, but it's very much around understanding where people are at a point in time. So that peer support side of it is that if you're out and about and that active listening, if you can't remember a person's name, what hope have you got of remembering the incident or what they've just been talking to you about there? And that's
Yeah,
formalised, when with people as when you go through as a negotiator, and then even
yeah,
in informal mediation accreditation in Civvy Street. Again, it's those same things around that peer engagement and that reflecting and listening and the active listening skills, and then being able to then reflect on what that person said, so that you're actually creating, those pathways. Because, as I said, if you don't have good peer support, which I say is peer support is the frontline response to injury management, and that's a personal perspective,
yeah,
and that's the way I treat it. So as a peer support officer, it's not about the rank of the person. The rank can reflect probably the injuries that they've received and probably some of the personal stories to then give you opportunities and lessons learnt from mistakes that they've made. And then I sort of say, from a peer support perspective, I've got no dramas, saying to people, I do this to help myself. Or have you thought about an occupational therapist if you're not getting on with the psych? And they go, well, what's the difference with the other? And I said, well, for my personality, as a hands-on perspective, I want tools. I want you to tell me how to do it. I want you to tell me why to do it and tell me when to do it, and then I'll copy that. So you give me the tools and then leave me alone and I'll do it. I don't need a hug. Other people don't have that personality. So that peer support is around knowing those people and knowing what we have in the background in terms of formal settings and opportunities for people who are very good at their trade. But that first peer support engagement and that peer role in terms of the behaviours that we model is around making sure that we have that environment there where someone goes, you know what, that bloke or that chick is someone that I can talk to now. I'm not feeling well. I feel comfortable enough, and they're an approachable person. I've heard them talking with staff before. I've heard them having a joke and laugh. They're approachable, and I think that I have the opportunity to be able to unload and not be judged, and be given opportunities to be able to go. And a lot of the times when I am talking to someone is that I will show my own vulnerability so that they can actually reflect on it and go, oh, okay, well, I wouldn't have thought you would have had that problem. So to go, mate, if you think you can get through a career in policing or emergency services or military without having a scar or hiding a scar, then don't start your career. You have to accept that injuries will occur, physical, physiological, emotional, but hopefully is the systems that we have in place and as we move through our career is that we don't keep making those same mistakes. And I think that's why, from formalising that peer support role, it allows people, and I'm not saying you have to wear a big red, make, America great again hat to say I'm a peer support officer. Peer support officers are found by their peers. And a lot of the times that's why they're recommended to go into those roles, because they are approachable people, they are hands-on, and they're amongst the people. And in saying that, I'm quite guarded. I can count the number of friends on one hand. That doesn't mean that I'm not sociable. That doesn't mean that I don't care about people. I just keep, my friends and family close to me so that I have my emotional resilience and I have my ducks in a row to know what I need to exist and function at a certain level. And everyone else is different.
Yeah, no, that's a
understanding their differences.
Yeah, it's a great insight into how that operates. No, thank you. Building camaraderie and support. How does a strong team maintain unity in high pressure or traumatic incidents? Because that's become a bit of an issue these days everywhere. It's just something. Just wanted to see what you reckon.
Well, I think we went through an inquiry in the Victoria Police, and then Queensland then went through the Fitzgerald inquiry. So I'd sort of gone through one as a junior officer, not understanding a lot of what was going on at that particular time in terms of where that particular organisation was going, and then seeing the legacy of the Fitzgerald inquiry, and then officers such as myself that were coming up, to fit into those middle management areas and put some seniority back on the street with that abridged program that was going through at that time. It was interesting because I think a lot of those changes that occurred in those periods of time, it chipped away at what I call as the esprit de corps. It's the way we did business. And in those days, everyone socialised after work. Everyone socialised with each other. We would train in the mornings together. We'd then go down to the firearms range under the station. You'd be at the gym, and then you're getting kitted up, and then you're out working together with each other. And then you're out drinking beers later, or you're at the footy club training. So it was very much a family, and there was a strong sense of belonging. And what seemed to be the unintended consequences of some of those inquiries was to actually strip that bare and take that away. That it was this, it was some sort of toxicity that had crept in around alpha males and alpha females, and the way we're doing business. When a lot of it, there was a lot of emotional barriers that was built up. There was a lot of emotional resilience because debriefings were actually being done. It just wasn't called a debrief. You talked about those jobs. You socialised together, so no one was ever really left alone. You were travelling to and from work with your mates in the car, or you're travelling with partners. Whereas what I've seen at the moment is that most people can work a shift and know nothing about the person they've actually worked with now. And that's the size of the organisation.
Yeah.
But also you're not working with the same partners anymore, so you don't know skills and capabilities and how they're going to behave in certain situations. So it's a whole new operating environment, and then look at the seniority that we're losing at the moment, and then look at the the value of the new blood that we're coming through and new ideas and innovation and those things. But it's very much it's a changing environment, and what I try and focus on is that I can't change an organisation, but what can I do on a day-to-day basis is that's around my behaviour in terms of the way I look, the way I act, and the way I behave in that workplace. So at least then I build the esprit de corps, and I build the that teamwork around that point in time and that shift or that job. And it's different for every circumstances. My last shift before I had this operation was around, we got absolutely hammered. The suicides, the axe job going through a door and then lighting a fire and then a plane that wasn't going to land. It just kept dishing it to us. But at the end of the shift, I was still able to walk into that day room and they're having a joke and laugh about the different jobs, and they're punching away at the paperwork, and, we're talking about different things and their questions are going back and forward. That says it was a good shift.
Yeah.
That says to me that the esprit de corps for that shift at that point in time, despite us being absolutely overwhelmed with the volume of code twos and the number of jobs, we made a difference as a team. And they should be proud, because they can go home, and look back at that shift and go, that was a cracker. But did we make a difference on the day? Yes, we did. Did we get some wins? Yep. And we got some losses as well. But I look at it and sort of go, well, the whole team goes home. We completed all the jobs despite what was stitched up. We probably forgot things as well, but with the high volume and the variety of tasks, that was to be expected. So I think very much, my focus, particularly, in my last 5 years, is very much around making a difference on a day-to-day basis. The organisational changes, have to occur at a higher level from the executive leadership team, and have to occur from government and what society's prepared to accept in terms of changes in legislation to make our job easier, whether it's DV or whether it's youth crime, on how it's being. Our job is to uphold the law and make sure that we do the best job we have with the resources we have at a point in time. And I think with the people that we've got coming through, and the level of training that they receive, we're in a good position. I just worry about our seniority and that legacy of what we're leaving. As I said, there's a lot of violence that's out there, which is probably not reported unless you're going to sit there and do your review of body worns. But what we used to want to be a job when I first joined in 1990, you got once every couple of months, not every shift, and multiple times during a shift. And that's what I say about working in our discrete remote communities, is that the level of violence and the level of exposure that officers are exposed to up there is far greater than a quiet sleepy suburb, but managed well and supported in those roles, we develop far greater skill sets for those officers that come out of those areas, from in terms of their emotional resilience, their ability to solve problems by themselves, the ability to work remotely without resources. They are a lot more tactically aware of what they can do when you've got 300 people and there's two of you. So there is very much around that emotional intelligence and their forward thinking, because you're coming out of these tactically dangerous situations where they are far outnumbered, and they're in total cultural differences that they're trying to manage at a point in time. I think is great for them.
I think it's the best experience. I think that should be a thing where people should go and work in the remotes to get to learn about themselves, at the same time get to learn about how they can cope with less resources, and then when they're out in the cities and stuff, they have a better understanding of their own capability. That's a very important,
and appreciation for their time management, what's on their work list. And it's no different to an officer that comes from a very busy station to a station that doesn't. It's horses for
Yeah.
courses, but it shouldn't be seen as a punishment.
No, no.
But
It's an
as we all
experience.
know, there's a shelf life,
Yeah,
and what could be 6 months for you could be 10.5 years for me.
yeah. Yeah, it's different. And what simple actions can officers take daily to strengthen camaraderie, like just at an officer level?
I sort of say, it's the interactions. If I look like some cranky, unapproachable senior sergeant or the old warrant officer disciplinary that walked around with a pace stick that you never came near because you always thought he was going to, drive the stick across your
Smash
ears.
it. Yeah,
Exactly. That's not approachable. That may say discipline and it may say structured and it may say respect. But is that respect or is it fear? Because there's a fine line. So I would rather that respect than the fear. And I think that camaraderie and how that, how we work as a unit collectively is around understanding, that same commander's intent. And mine's always get the job done to the best that we can and get home safely. And yeah, we're going to get injuries. It's how we manage those injuries. Yeah, we're going to get hiccups. It's how we manage the hiccups, because no job runs smoothly and no job runs the same each way.
yeah,
But it's that learning evolution, and that's a revisit and go, we did this well, we didn't do that well. And I sort of say that even from a commander's perspective, as in, hey, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? What have we missed? Because that reflection and development allows you to keep improving. If you think you've got it right, you're dreaming.
yeah, yeah. It's not a vacuum. It's a live situation. Things gonna go pear shaped, left, right, and center. So
Yeah,
no. It's a very very important point in all those things you're raising and saying, because it resonates really well. What actually happens. It's not a vacuum. It's a real life situation.
but
How
on
important
your
is
point there,
yeah,
Ahmed,
yeah,
I think on your point there in terms of like what can they do personally on those sort of things there, and I can only reflect on what I do personally, and that is
yeah,
I've always tried to maintain a level of fitness, and that varies from when you're young, single, and no commitments, to two kids under 14 months apart. I don't know what happened in that first 3 years. But a lot of that training and that sort of stuff was kids on the push bike together, and it's around adaptation and improvising and modifying at that point in time, and then getting
yeah,
your partner involved in that joint fitness. And sometimes it's just around survival, with the shift work and that. And I think the other thing too is that then as you transition to remote spots, you're not going to have the gym, so that's when you get involved in your community sport, because that gives you that positive interaction with the community. It opens them up to see that there's a person behind the uniform. It allows you
yeah,
to take on volunteer positions so that there's a different level of investment in the community.
yeah,
And that determines the way that you're treated when you're turning up to the jobs when you're in kit. So I think personal fitness has always then guaranteed at least some level of mental health and well-being.
yeah,
Um, and then it's very easy for us to fall away from diet and structured routines. And I'm not suggesting that we're all perfect at it, but again, it's very easy to eat shit food when we're busy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but like I'm looking at it here now, like it's different to the old days. You can have your mixed variety of nuts there, and there's some snacks, and I cook chicken up for the week, based on what my shifts are going to be. A big fried rice to get some carbs in. So
yeah,
doesn't mean I don't go and have the dirty macas on night shift. I look at that as my reward.
yeah.
And I'm not eating the quarter pound with a lot, but hey, if you're going to give me a coffee and a hamburger, and the hamburger's $2, well, I'll take your hamburger every day of the week. Um, and that's no different to the training. Some days you can train well. And there's other days where I sort of say your training was turning up to the gym because you maintain a routine.
Yeah.
So
It's got to have
you've got
some
to
sort
be
of
you've
routine.
got to be kind to yourself with that sort of thing, and be
Yeah.
realistic. If you think you're going to train at 100% all the time, then you're setting yourself up to fail. It's
Yeah.
around having those realistic expectations around that training and routine, and giving yourself the best opportunities to be physically fit and prepared.
Yeah.
Because I said the better you are prepared, One, I sort of say, when I copped all those fractures and that stuff, I think my recovery over that 14 months in the wheelchair was a hell of a lot better and a lot quicker because of my baseline fitness.
Yeah.
I think the level of my internal injuries, on impact, the body took a hell of a lot of that, but bone mass and muscle mass density and those sort of things takes on more based on your level of fitness at the time. Had it been a couple of years prior to that, when I probably wasn't as invested and I was busy in other areas, it probably would have been a 3-year recovery, or I may not have got a lot of those areas back to where I've got them now.
Yeah.
So
it's so important to be prepared, like all the time, like in terms of your fitness is help, because that helps with injuries and recovery. That's such an important point there. And on that note, well-being and sustainability, what strategies have helped you maintain balance and resilience across your career?
I think one of the things that I've been lucky with is that, I've invested in my relationship with my wife. We hit the 30 years married in January this year on the 24th.
Oh, congratulations. Long
You know,
time.
some would say 3 life sentence, three death sentences. But for me, that's part of that emotional resilience in terms of I had a strong partner that hasn't been prepared to judge. When I was struggling with the PDS and I'd sort of gone 4 years undiagnosed at that point in time, and I was very destructive at that point in time, probably very challenging for my leaders to manage. So great, sending me into tactically dangerous situations, and this guy keeps doing these jobs. But it wasn't until a point in time that I did a negotiation and do a gun job when I had my son in the car. I picked him up from school and driven him all the way, and then had done the whole negotiation on the car phone at the time. And then I walked back after I resolved the incident tactically face to face, and then go back to the car. I said, "What are you doing there?" And he goes, "You picked me up." And he still remembers you because the first thing he says, "Don't tell your mother." So he's in the army now, so he gets it.
Yeah.
But I think the family came on the journey as well. So I was very much around making sure they understood, when I was sick or when I wasn't handling things, and when I was struggling to cope. So my survival was around me managing my situation, not trying to have to manage the family. And that comes down to, making sure your partner is understanding those processes. And when you're struggling, put your hand up and sort of say, "Hey, I'm going to jump into the early intervention program." And they go, "What's that mean?" I go, "I don't know. I've never been there before. But it's been recommended, a peer recommended, the psych had recommended it." And I went, "Well, what have I got to lose? Because currently what I'm doing is not working. I don't want to lose my family. I don't mind a fight. But currently I don't have the skills to fight this because I didn't know what it was. I'd never been there before." So, PDS, which then comes with depression and a lot of these other issues, and these self-destructive behaviours, if you've never been there before, how are you supposed to know what to do? Which is why, the right peers, the right people and systems in place, and feeling comfortable enough to go, "I don't have the tools, I need help," was probably my saviour. And part of that is your own humility to sort of say, I'm not doing well with this. If I'm destroying relationships or I'm destroying friendships, and I'm being an absolute prick to my upline, and they go, "Well, what's wrong with this bloke? I could just use him for the tough jobs, but don't have a conversation with him." That's not being successful in your environment.
Yeah.
So that's why I say is that around, I've been lucky that I've had a strong partner with regards to that, and I'll take a hat off to her because there's been some challenging times, but we've had 10 years apart while I've been working in these other areas there, but we never missed a phone call each day. So again, it was around, what were the training or what were those things and the consistency, and that was around, okay, it doesn't matter what it was, every day we were going to talk.
Yep.
So realistic expectations and sticking to it. If the routine works and it works for you and it doesn't work for someone else, I don't care, as long as it works for you.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point there on that, how to manage that. What advice would you give officers to protect their mental health and family life?
I think honesty. Be honest with yourself. When you're not coping at work or it's outside your skill set. Invest in that learning that you need to do to develop yourself. And I've always maintained, businesses outside of work. One, I don't sit still, so I need to be active, physically active. And that physically active, I also needed to exhaust the mind. Like someone said to me the other day, like, how do you deal with the demons? And I said to the officer at the time, I said, I tell them to shut up, because unless they're going to contribute to what I'm dealing with at the time, I'm busy, not now.
Yeah.
And
That's
she said, oh, can I use that? And I said, if it works for you. But that demon is going to have that conversation with you whether you like it or not. What you do with the conversation is totally up to you. And I think that's the difference. Is if you there's a difference between the arrogance and confidence. Arrogance says that you're prepared to fight the demon, but you lose the fight every time and you tell everyone you're winning. Confidence is knowing the demon's going to have that conversation with you whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
But knowing you have the skills, or you've put your hand up to learn the skills to go through that. And some of those things is, if you need a body pillow between you and your partner because you still fight the demons at night time, tell them why you put the body pillow there. Make them part of the journey, make them part of that understanding as to why you're doing things at a point in time. Or with one of my staff recently, he goes, well, I just don't want to go to the shops. I don't like being around people. So again, it was talking through that process to go, well, this is what I did. I like to have a coffee, and I know you like to have your coffee. So have you thought about going to the coffee shop and watching your entrances and exits just to have your coffee? And then the next week, after you've built up that routine of getting to the coffee shop, move yourself to actually trying to read the paper at the same location, because now you've added one more thing. You're not controlling your environment anymore, and you're taking out one of your senses. And he went, oh, so we had the discussion at the end of that week. And I said, right, now move yourself outside the shop into the main thoroughfare, but put yourself in the corner so you still have some level of control, but don't read the paper. Enjoy your coffee and people watch. Get your body and get your mind used to the noise. And he goes, oh, where'd you learn this? And I said, because my wife likes shopping and I hate it. And I said, so if I want to invest in my relationship, I had to learn how to get around that. So I had to find the reason to learn that, because if it was left up to me, I'll get my takeaway coffee. I'll go to the gym and do it. So it was like, find a reason rather than find the excuse. Yeah. So if you find the reason, and sometimes it's just because I want the fight, then accept that you're going to get in a fight. And part of that is the demon, whether it's PTS, whether it's these the triggers that will come back through smell and sight and those sort of things that we've been exposed to. Accept it, develop your skills, get yourself around the right people, have the right emotional support, whether it's a partner at a point in time, and be honest with yourself. Accept that you're going to make mistakes on that journey, and that's part of being human. And unfortunately, it's part of policing.
No, that's a very, very good advice there. And tell the demon to go and not now. I think it's a very good one.
I probably use some other words there at that point in time, because I talk about the one there where people have the recurring dreams, and I have this one that sits on my chest, and the whole point of it is that it's not until you understand. The whole point of it is to immobilize you so you can't protect your family, and that's where you have to. That's a different fight when you don't have all the tools and the skills. If you think you can resolve everything physically, testosterone's not going to do that for you. A skill set. There's always going to be someone that's better than you. So we've had to get smarter over the years where we don't have the ability, say, physically anymore, and there's younger ones coming into the game. You have to be smart about how you do business.
Yeah, that's a very, very great point there, and advice for people listening there. And what does strong strive to reach optimal new goal means to you in policing?
Say that acronym again.
Strive to reach optimal new goals.
To me, the number of, I suppose, critical incidents over the years, every day's a bonus. So enjoy it. And It's not always nice. But when you actually, when you want to achieve and you want to learn, then it's a bit like, the fat kid in the candy shop. There's a lot of choices and you can enjoy
Yeah.
yourself. So if you're open to that sort of thing and that analogy, then, like, be the fat kid in the candy shop. The candy's there for you to choose.
Yeah.
There is a consequence for every one of those candies. But that's life, so strive to be the best you can at that point in time, bring people with you on the journey, and don't ask anything of anyone that you're not prepared to do yourself. And I think that'll hold you in good stead.
That's a very, very good advice for the listeners out there and to incorporate in their life. Mossy, thank you for sharing your journey, leadership insight, and commitment to monitoring others. Your perspective reinforces that policing is not just about the job, it's about people, trust, and standing shoulder to shoulder. Looking after your mates, six is not a slogan, it's a daily responsibility that saves careers, families, and lives. To all listeners, continue to check in with each other, lead with integrity, and never underestimate the power of camaraderie. This is Strong Legacy Podcast, honoring service, strengthening culture, and building leaders who look after their own. Thank you very much.
Too easy. Thanks, Ahmet. Stay safe out
Thanks.
there, same as everyone else.
You too, mate.